The air in Heron's Landing was supposed to be a cure. That's what I'd told myself during the final, brutal year, a year defined by sterile hospital corridors, the hushed whispers of doctors, and the slow, inevitable fading of my wife, Eleanor. The air here, scented with pine, and the clean, metallic tang of lake water, was meant to scrub the scent of antiseptic from my memory. The sound, the gentle lapping of waves against a shore, was meant to replace the rhythmic, heartbreaking beep of the machines that had measured out the last moments of her life. I had traded a world of ruthless efficiency and calculated chaos for one of deliberate, healing peace. Or so I had prayed. My new house was a testament to a life we were supposed to live together. A modest but beautiful cedar and glass structure. It was nestled on a small, wooded lot that sloped gently down to the jewel of the property, a private, deep-water pier. It was the pier that had sold me. The pier Eleanor had picked out from a dozen blueprints before she got too sick. That one. Alex, she'd whispered, her finger tracing the lines on the paper. That's where we'll watch the sunsets. A place for just us. It was a long, sturdy wooden walkway, leading to a T-shaped dock, complete with a covered boat slip and a pair of simple Adirondack chairs. From there, you could see the whole expanse of Lake Anawanda, a shimmering blue heart in the chest of the Green Mountains. This was to be my sanctuary. This was where the noise of my old life and the silence of my new one might finally find some equilibrium. I'd been in the house for exactly 4 hours. The moving truck had just rumbled away, leaving a fortress of cardboard boxes and a quiet so profound it felt like a physical weight. I'd unpacked the essentials first, the high-end espresso machine Eleanor had insisted I buy, a worn leather armchair for the picture window, and a bottle of 10-year-old single malt scotch. And one other box, marked fragile. Office. From it, I carefully lifted a large, framed satellite hydrographic chart. To a casual observer, it was an abstract pattern of blue and green. But to me, it was a map of a coastline, intricately detailed with dredging depths, sediment composition, and current vectors. It was a memento from my biggest project, the one that had consumed me for 3 years, the one I'd been celebrating the completion of when Eleanor got her diagnosis. I leaned it against the wall, a stark reminder of a life that felt a million miles away. Pouring a celebratory dram, I walked out onto the deck, the late afternoon sun warm on my face. The pier beckoned. Before a single box was unpacked, I needed to stand on that pier, to keep a promise. I was halfway down the stone-paved path when a voice, sharp and commanding as a gull's cry, sliced through the tranquility. "You there! Stop right where you are!" I turned. Striding down the path from the driveway was a woman who seemed to be composed entirely of sharp angles and disapproval. She was in her late 50s, with a helmet of sprayed blonde hair that defied the gentle lake breeze. She wore a pristine white polo shirt with a small, embroidered heron logo, khaki shorts ironed to a razor's crease, and a visor pulled down so low it seemed to be physically compressing her forehead. In one hand, she clutched a clipboard like a weapon. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice even, though the intrusion felt like a raw nerve being scraped. She marched right up to me, her eyes scanning my property with the forensic intensity of a crime scene investigator. She didn't look at me, but at my house, my lawn, the placement of a stray garden hose. "I'm Brenda Fromm," she announced, her tone implying the name should be accompanied by a trumpet flourish. "President of the Heron's Landing Homeowners Association. I don't believe we've met." "Alex Turner. I just moved in." I offered a hand. She ignored it, her gaze finally landing on me, then traveling down the path towards the pier. Her eyes lingered for a moment on the Marina complex visible across the small bay. A flicker of something possessive and resentful in her stare. Turner, she repeated, tasting the name and clearly finding it bland. Right. Lot 42. I saw the moving van. You have an excessive number of boxes visible from the street. That's a violation of Bylaw 7 Section C. All moving and delivery paraphernalia must be removed from public view within 2 hours of delivery. I'll give you a one-time warning, as a courtesy. I blinked. The sheer aggression was jarring. The truck left less than an hour ago. I was just... The rules are the rules, she snapped, her eyes narrowing. She then pointed the clipboard toward my destination. And that's the primary reason I'm here. The Pier. It's why I bought the house, I said, a defensive edge creeping into my voice. It's perfect. It's community property, she declared. The statement was so bald, so utterly confident, it almost knocked me off balance. I chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. I'm quite certain it's not. The survey, title, and deed are explicitly clear. The property line extends 30 feet into the water, and the pier is exclusively deeded to this lot. Brenda Fromm let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like a stone hitting glass. Oh, the real estate agents. They'll tell you anything to make a sale. But we, the HOA, manage all waterfront amenities for the good of the community. Your deed has covenants, Mr. Turner. Covenants you agreed to when you purchased. We require a copy of the key for the gate and the access code for the boat lift. She was pointing at the sturdy, locked gate at the head of the pier. It was a feature I'd specifically added, a small symbol of the privacy Eleanor and I had craved. I'm sorry, but there must be a misunderstanding, I said, my voice losing its warmth. The fatigue of the move, the grief that was my constant companion, it all coalesced into a simmering anger. This pier is private property. There is no community access. We'll see about that, she sniffed, making a furious note on her clipboard. The CC and Rs are very clear about hoarding lake access. Heron's Landing is about community. It's about sharing. It's not for selfish people who want to keep the best parts for themselves. Her eyes, small and hard, bored into me. In my old life, I'd dealt with union bosses, hostile corporate raiders, and ministers of transportation from fledgling dictatorships. I'd negotiated billion-dollar infrastructure deals across 3 continents. I knew a power play when I saw one. This wasn't about community. It was about control. It was about her control. I'll be happy to review the documents, I said, my tone hardening to a polished, professional veneer. But I can assure you, the pier is private. I have no intention of providing open access. You'll receive a formal notice of violation, she shot back, her face flushing a mottled pink. And if you don't comply, there will be fines. Daily fines. And we have a lawyer, Mr. Turner. A very good one. She pivoted on her sensible walking shoes and marched back up the path. The clipboard held high, a scepter of petty tyranny. I stood there, the scotch in my hand forgotten, the healing lake air suddenly feeling heavy and charged. I looked at the shimmering water, at the sturdy lines of my pier, my promised sanctuary. The battle for my hard-won peace had just begun, and it had begun over a few planks of wood and a locked gate. A familiar, cold resolve began to settle deep in my gut. I had designed and managed systems worth billions, systems that spanned oceans. I would learn the system governing this little fiefdom, and I would dismantle it. Brenda Fromm had no idea who she had just declared war on. The first volley in Brenda's war of attrition arrived 2 days later. It was a crisp, cream-colored envelope, embossed with the Heron's Landing Heron logo, left primly tucked into my mailbox. Inside, on thick, self-important letterhead, was the official notice. Not about the pier, that, I suspected, was a longer-term objective. This was the opening salvo, designed to test my defenses. The letter detailed 2 separate infractions. The first was a $50 fine for unapproved landscape illumination, citing Bylaw 12 Section F. This referred to the dozen small, solar-powered pathlights I had pushed into the mulch along the walkway to the front door. The second fine was $25 for an improper welcome mat, a violation of Bylaw 9 Section B, which apparently stipulated that all doormats must be of a natural fiber composition and earth-toned coloration. Mine was a durable, dark gray mat made of recycled rubber. I read the letter, then read it again. It wasn't the money. It was the sheer, breathtaking pettiness. I felt a flicker of the old rage I used to feel in boardrooms, the frustration with irrational actors attempting to disrupt a logical system. But I suppressed it. I would be the reasonable one. I would comply. That evening, I dutifully pulled up the solar lights and tossed the offending mat into the garage. The next morning, I sent a check for $75 to the HOA, with a polite, concise note stating that the issues had been remedied. This was de-escalation. My act of good faith was met with another cream-colored envelope a week later. This time, the fine was $150. The violation, improper storage of recreational equipment. My crime was having my new sea kayak, a sleek, 12-foot vessel, resting on a set of padded sawhorses on my back deck. This time, I got methodical. I downloaded the full 87-page PDF of the Heron's Landing CC and Rs. It was like dissecting a poorly drafted shipping manifest, full of vague language and internal contradictions. My old life had taught me that the devil, and the advantage, was always in the details. The improper storage bylaw conflicted with another section, encouraging aesthetic integration of recreational lifestyles. More importantly, I found the section on levying fines. It required a written warning, followed by a 10-day period to cure the violation, before any fine could be assessed. Brenda had skipped a step. I drafted a letter, polite and formal, pointing out the procedural failure and respectfully stating that the fine was therefore invalid. I also included a photograph of my neighbor's property 2 doors down, where 2 brightly colored paddleboards had been leaning against their house for the entire week. I sent it via certified mail, return receipt requested. Then I made a phone call to Marcus Thorne, my chief counsel for 2 decades, and the executor of Eleanor's will. "Alex, how's the quiet life?" His voice boomed over the phone. "The quiet is being actively disrupted," I said. "I have a local governance issue." I explained the situation, the fines, the pier. Marcus laughed. "An HOA, Alex. You've outmaneuvered Russian oligarchs, and you're getting hassled by a homeowners association. Every system has its own rules of engagement," I said calmly. "This one's just smaller and sloppier." I paused. "Speaking of which, how is the final paperwork on the Anawanda Marina acquisition coming along? Any hitches with the title, transfer for the residential master deed?" There was a moment of silence. "Smooth sailing. Alex, should be finalized by the end of the week. You'll officially own the whole playground soon. Why don't tell me your new friend is part of the Marina board too?" "No," I said, a thin smile on my face. "She's just the president of a sub-entity with an inflated sense of its own jurisdiction. I'm just establishing a baseline. But do me a favor. When the transfer is complete, keep it quiet. Leave the registered agent as the holding company for now. I want to see how this plays out organically. You're playing with your food, Alex, Marcus said, his tone a mixture of amusement and concern. You were supposed to be getting away from all this. I am, I said, looking out at the pier Eleanor had chosen. I'm protecting the peace, vigorously. I hung up. Brenda Fromm thought she was playing checkers. She had no idea she was playing on my board, a board I was in the process of buying out from under her. The certified letter seemed to have struck a nerve. For 2 weeks, there were no more cream-colored envelopes. I allowed myself a sliver of hope that my methodical, legalistic response had forced her to back down. It was a naive hope. The escalation, when it came, was subtler and more malicious. It started with the kayak straps. I kept the kayak on a wall-mounted rack in my garage. One morning, I went to take it out, and as I unbuckled the top strap, it fell away in my hand, limp and useless. It had been cut, a clean, sharp slice almost all the way through, leaving just a few threads intact. The second strap was the same. Had I not been paying attention, the 70-pound kayak could have come crashing down on me. My blood ran cold. This was a physical act. Deniable. But a clear message. That afternoon, I didn't call the police. I invested in a professional-grade, multi-camera security system, the kind I had installed to oversee operations at container terminals. It featured marine-grade, weatherproof cameras with thermal imaging and night vision, and a dedicated server for continuous, high-definition recording, all backed up to a secure cloud I controlled. I installed the system myself over the next 2 days, creating a network of infallible, impartial witnesses. I was building a data set. The system paid its first dividend a week later. I had been landscaping, putting in a small garden of rose bushes, Eleanor's favorite, a vibrant red variety called Mr. Lincoln, along the property line. I woke up to find them destroyed, trampled, and torn. My first emotion was a hot spike of grief, so sharp it took my breath away. It was quickly replaced by cold, analytical resolve. I went to my office, logged into the security system, and pulled up the footage. At 2:17 a.m., a figure in dark clothing methodically stomped on each rose bush. Then, just as they were turning to leave, a second event occurred. A small bird feeder on my neighbor's side of the property line suddenly tilted and swung in front of my camera's lens, obscuring the view. It was too perfect a coincidence. I reviewed the footage from a different, concealed camera. From there, I could see the figure reach up with a long pole and deliberately knock the bird feeder into position. The pole was distinctive, a telescoping aluminum pole with a bright yellow handle, the same kind Brenda Fromm used to clean her second-story windows. I saved the clips, meticulously documented the damage, and got a written estimate from a landscaper for the cost of replacement. I filed a police report for vandalism, fully aware it would be closed for lack of conclusive evidence of the perpetrator's identity. It was all for the record. The data set was growing. That evening, I sent another email to Marcus. The subject line was Phase 2. The body of the email was simple. The acquisition should be final now. Please initiate a full financial audit on the Heron's Landing HOA as majority stakeholder. I want to see every invoice, every check, every transfer for the last 5 years. Subpoena the bank records. I have a feeling the procedural sloppiness extends to their accounting. I attached the landscaper's estimate and the police report number. My note at the end read, "Please also open a civil case file. Title it, Turner v. Fromm and the Heron's Landing HOA. We're not filing yet. We're just building it. I clicked send. The trampled roses were a stark, ugly scar. Brenda thought she was conducting a series of isolated raids. She failed to understand that I was treating it as a campaign. And in my campaigns, I never, ever lost. Having failed to intimidate me, Brenda shifted her strategy from my property to my reputation. Her new battlefield was the Heron's Landing Neighbors private Facebook group. Her first post was a masterpiece of passive aggression. Just a friendly reminder to everyone, especially our newer residents. She wrote that Heron's Landing has always been a community built on the principle of sharing. It's so sad to see the modern trend of selfishness and individualism creeping into our little paradise. The post was accompanied by a photo of the lake, conspicuously featuring the end of my private pier. The comment section filled with her loyal followers. So true. Brenda Wells said, "A man named George tried to mount a defense. Private property is private property." Brenda's response was swift and brutal, dismissing him as an outsider who didn't live on the water. George was silenced. The social isolation began almost immediately. A friendly wave was met with a curt nod. At the mailboxes, conversations would cease the moment I approached. I was being systematically ostracized. One afternoon, as I was working in my front yard, an older woman with a kind, wrinkled face and a gentle smile stopped her golf cart. "You must be Mr. Turner," she said. "I'm Mildred. I live over on Cove Road. Please don't pay any mind to Brenda." "It's a little hard to ignore," I admitted. Mildred sighed, her gaze drifting towards Brenda's meticulously manicured lawn down the street. "Brenda hasn't been the same the last few years. Her husband, Richard, he was a big-shot executive at a manufacturing firm. They had the biggest boat in the Marina, a beautiful Sea Ray. Then the company downsized, and Richard was forced into early retirement. They had to sell the boat, the fancy cars. I think this." She gestured vaguely at the neighborhood. "This HOA presidency. It's the only place she feels important anymore. The only thing she still controls. It's sad. Really." Her story didn't excuse Brenda's actions, but it colored them with a pathetic, desperate hue. This was a woman clinging to the wreckage of a former life, and she saw me, with my new house and my private pier, as a symbol of everything she had lost. Brenda escalated a week later. Concerned neighbors alert. She posted, "Please be aware of a recent increase in suspicious activity around the waterfront, particularly near Lot 42. There have been reports of strange lights at all hours, and an individual spending a lot of time just watching the water. Please keep your children close and report anything unusual." The strange lights were my security spotlights. The individual watching the water was me. She was painting me as a predator. My anger, which I had kept on a tight leash, began to fray. This crossed a line. The accusation hit a raw nerve I hadn't realized was still so exposed. It brought back a flood of memories of hushed conversations with fertility doctors, of Eleanor's quiet tears after another failed attempt, of the unspoken sadness of the life we couldn't have. We had dreamed of children, of teaching them to fish from that very pier. To have that dream twisted into something so ugly was a desecration. That afternoon, my scheduled call with Marcus had a grim seriousness. "Alex, the preliminary financials on that HOA are a cesspool," he said without preamble. "From is the president. Her husband is the treasurer, and her best friend is the secretary. They've been using the HOA's primary bank account like a personal slush fund for years. Community event expenses that match her daughter's wedding receipts. Consulting fees paid to a shell corporation registered to her husband's cousin. It's a classic case, I said. A closed system with no oversight. It's felony-grade embezzlement, Marcus corrected. But there's more. The pier. The master deed explicitly designates the piers on those 5 premium lots as indefeasible private property, appurtenant to the lot, and not subject to community easement or HOA control. It's ironclad. She was on the board when the lot next to you was sold 8 years ago, and the same issue came up. The board received a legal opinion at that time, reaffirming the private status. She's not just mistaken. Alex. She's lying. The pieces clicked into place. The pier was the pretext. She wanted me gone. An inquisitive, methodical outsider was a threat to her corrupt little kingdom. Marcus, I said, my voice low and hard. She just posted on the community forum implying I'm a threat to children. The line went silent for a few seconds. Okay, Marcus said, his voice dropping to the register I knew meant he was done playing games. That's it. Tortious interference. Defamation per se. We have the financials. We have the master deed. We can crush her. Do you want me to pull the trigger? I considered it. The thought of unleashing the full legal weight of my resources on her was deeply tempting, but it felt incomplete. Not yet, I said. A lawsuit would be my word against hers. She'd paint it as the rich outsider bullying the dedicated community volunteer. I need the data set to be complete. I need her to escalate one more time, in a way that is undeniable and public. Let's see the full extent of the system's failure before we step in to replace it. You're baiting her, Alex, Marcus warned. I'm giving her the opportunity to fully define the terms of her own defeat. I corrected him. Let her make her move. I'll be ready. The weaponization of civic authority is a classic tactic of the petty tyrant. The first visitor was a man from the County Code Enforcement Office, responding to an anonymous complaint about my unpermitted pier. I calmly presented him with the county-stamped permits and the final inspection certificates. He left, annoyed at having his time wasted. The second visitor was from Animal Control, following up on a detailed complaint about a neglected, constantly barking dog. I don't own a dog. She apologized and left, looking confused. As her van pulled away, I saw George, the man who had defended me on Facebook, jogging over. Turner. Alex. Right? He said, slightly out of breath. I'm George. Look, I saw that van. Is she calling the authorities on you now? It appears so, I said. George shook his head in disgust. Listen, I just wanted to say, what she's doing isn't right. Most of us don't agree with her. We're just intimidated. She's been running things for so long. People are afraid to cross her. But this is too far. If you need anything, a witness or anything, you let me know. I appreciate that, George. Thank you. I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. It was a small crack in the wall of isolation Brenda had tried to build around me. But it was the third visit that shattered the last of my restraint. They were from the County Department of Child and Family Services. We received an anonymous tip on our hotline, the woman explained, her expression unreadable. The caller expressed concern about a man living alone at this address, who was reportedly seen observing and photographing children at the community park. The words hit me like a physical blow. The day I had tried to introduce myself to that family, I had been about to text Marcus. They had twisted an innocent gesture into something monstrous. The hour that followed was the most humiliating of my life. I answered their questions, my voice a monotone of forced calm. The memory of Eleanor's grief, a hot coal in my chest. Finally, they left. One of them murmuring an apology, noting that the complaint had all the hallmarks of being weaponized. After they left, I stood in the center of my living room, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The sanctuary had been defiled. She had taken a disagreement about a pier and escalated it into an accusation that could ruin a person's life. That was the end of my patience. That was the end of my calculated, data-gathering approach. I called Marcus. "It's done," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. She crossed the line. I told him about the visit. For the first time in our 20-year association, I heard Marcus swear, a string of sharp, vicious curses. "That's it," he snarled. "The gloves are off. What's the plan?" "There is no more passive observation," I said. "She wanted to know who I am. It's time she found out. Prepare the full litigation package, the civil suit, the evidence for the DA, and the formal notice of breach to the HOA board. But don't file anything yet. I'm going to deliver the news in person. There's an annual community picnic scheduled for this Saturday. She'll be there, holding court. That's where we'll end this." A public confrontation, Alex. That can be messy. "It's not a confrontation, Marcus," I replied, my voice as cold and still as the deep water beneath my pier. "It's a hostile takeover, and I want everyone to be there to witness it." The final escalation happened on a Thursday afternoon. I was in my backyard, meticulously repairing the damage to the rose bushes, when Brenda appeared at the edge of my property. She held a pair of long-handled garden shears, rhythmically snipping them open and shut. Snick, snick, snick. "I hear you had some visitors this week," she said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "You must be a very busy man." I finally looked up at her. It seems a lot of people have a penchant for anonymous, baseless complaints. Her smile widened. "It's a concerned community. Turner, we protect our values. People like you come in here, with your money and your secrets, and you think you can just do whatever you want." She took a step forward. "I think your little experiment in Heron's Landing is about over," she said, her voice dropping to a threatening tone. "You have that nice boat in your slip there. It would be a real shame if something happened to it. A fire. Maybe. Electrical faults can be so unpredictable." Snick. Snick. "Or maybe," she continued, "you'll have an accident yourself. It can be slippery down on the pier, especially at night. A man living all alone. Who would even know if you fell in?" I had already discreetly activated the audio recording app on my phone, which was resting on the garden stool beside me. "And your job?" she said, playing what she thought was her trump card. "Some kind of consultant for a shipping company. I hear employers don't like trouble. They really don't like hearing that Child Protective Services has been called on them. I know people, Turner, a single phone call, and your quiet little work-from-home gig could just disappear." She had laid all her cards on the table. I slowly rose, brushing the dirt from my hands. My internal monologue was a whirlwind. "Threaten my job, lady. You're standing on company property while threatening the company's owner. The sheer, blissful ignorance of it would be funny if it weren't so pathetic." "Is that all, Brenda?" I asked, my voice even. Her smug expression faltered, confused by my lack of reaction. "You think this is a joke?" she snarled. "On the contrary," I said, taking a deliberate step toward her, causing her to instinctively step back. "I'm taking this more seriously than you can possibly imagine. Thank you for clarifying your position so unambiguously. It has been very helpful. I turned my back on her then, a gesture of ultimate dismissal, and walked back toward my house. The smugness had vanished from her face, replaced by a dawning, uncertain fear. She had just emptied her entire arsenal at an opponent who hadn't even flinched. She had no more moves to make. Mine was next. The Heron's Landing annual community picnic was Brenda Fromm's coronation. It was held on the great lawn of the community clubhouse. At the center of it all, Brenda was holding court. She had set up a small stage with a lectern and a microphone. Her special agenda item for the day was a community vote on a resolution to reclaim the Lot 42 Pier for communal use. Legally, it was nonsense. But as political theater, it was brilliant. I arrived late. I walked onto the lawn just as Brenda was tapping the microphone. A murmur went through the assembly as they saw me standing at the back. Brenda's eyes found mine, and a flicker of pure, triumphant malice crossed her face. She launched into a 10-minute tirade that painted me as a shadowy interloper. "This man," she thundered, pointing a trembling finger directly at me, "wants to take what is rightfully ours, and I say, no more. It's time we, the community, took a stand." A smattering of enthusiastic applause broke out. It was at that moment that a quiet, organized procession began. From the service road, a line of 5 navy blue golf carts appeared. Driving the lead cart was Marcus Thorne. Beside him, and in the carts that followed, were a dozen men and women in crisp, white polo shirts, their logo a stylized A and T, intertwined over a sextant, the logo of the A.T. Maritime Group. The crowd stirred. Brenda's speech faltered. I began to walk forward. The crowd parted for me. I walked to the steps of the stage. "Get down from there," Brenda hissed. I ignored her, stepping up and taking the second microphone. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice clear and amplified. "My name is Alex Turner." I saw George and Mildred in the crowd. George gave me a subtle, encouraging nod. "There seems to be a significant misunderstanding here," I continued. "Mrs. Fromm is correct about one thing. This is about ownership. So let's talk about ownership." I looked directly at Brenda. Her face was a mask of disbelief and rage. For the past several months, Mrs. Fromm has been attempting to lead a vote to seize my pier. A pier which, she claims, is a community asset. I paused. Here is the misunderstanding. Brenda seems to be under the impression that the HOA's authority is the highest power in Heron's Landing. It is not. I gestured to Marcus, who stepped forward. 18 months ago, after a long illness, I lost my wife, Eleanor. Before she passed, we made a plan to retire here, to this specific place. As part of that plan, and to ensure the peace we sought would be permanent, my company, A.T. Maritime Group, a global leader in port and marina infrastructure management, began the process of acquiring the entirety of the Lake Anawanda Marina. The final paperwork cleared last week. The acquisition included the commercial slips, the clubhouse you're standing next to, and, most importantly, the master deed that governs the entire Heron's Landing development. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Brenda's jaw had gone slack, her eyes wide with dawning horror. The Heron's Landing HOA, I continued, is a sub-entity. It exists and operates at the discretion of the master deed holder. My company is that owner. I am that owner. You are all, in fact, living in my development. I let that sink in. So, when you were fining me for the color of my welcome mat, Brenda, you were fining your landlord. When you encouraged the vandalism of my property, you were vandalizing company assets. And when you threatened my livelihood, you were threatening the CEO and majority shareholder of the corporation that holds the mortgage on this very clubhouse. Marcus stepped forward and handed a thick document to Brenda. Mrs. From, he said, his voice cold. You are being served. This is a lawsuit for harassment, defamation, slander, and attempted extortion. He then handed her a second document. This is a copy of the forensic accounting audit of the HOA's finances, which has been turned over to the district attorney's office. It details 5 years of systematic embezzlement and fraud. Brenda stared at the documents as if they were venomous snakes. I held up my phone. And just 2 days ago, Mrs. From made direct, personal threats against me, including arson and physical violence. I pressed a button, and Brenda's own voice filled the air. A real shame if something happened to it. A fire. Maybe. Screams and gasps erupted. People stared at her with revulsion. Her face turned a ghastly, bloodless white. Therefore, I announced, effective immediately, A.T. Maritime Group is exercising its authority under Section 11 of the Master Deed. Due to gross mismanagement and fiscal malfeasance, the current HOA board is hereby dissolved. The HOA's assets are frozen. We will be holding an emergency election in 30 days to elect a new, interim board, my team. I said, gesturing to the people in the white polo shirts. We'll manage the transition. I put the microphone back in its stand. The reversal was total. Brenda From stood on her stage of triumph, speechless and horrified, surrounded by the ruins of her petty empire. She had stormed in demanding my Pier, not knowing that I owned her entire world. The aftermath was swift. The lawsuit bankrupted Brenda. Faced with irrefutable evidence, she settled, costing her every asset. The social fallout was brutal. She was a pariah. The criminal investigation by the district attorney's office was the final nail. She and her husband were indicted. To avoid prison, they pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud. They were sentenced to 5 years of probation, full financial restitution, and 1,000 hours of community service. The court-ordered restitution forced the sale of their house. With the old guard gone, the healing of Heron's Landing began. My transition team helped the